Okay. This is Gary Faust, the National Director of Benefits Training, and this training module is, or I guess this scenario is for the benefit of our regional directors and our representatives abroad. And this is going to be a small sample of not only some of the content and refresher for you all, but it's also going to be some of my thoughts in terms of giving this a number of times and the transitions that could be used during those slides. I'm going to take the liberty now to go ahead and increase my screen size so that it looks like I'm actually delivering this in real time. Okay, this particular slideshow is one that was created on behalf of a representative out in California, modeled after one that I've been using in and around the Tidewater, the Virginia area, Middle Tennessee, and Lower Alabama. So I want to make sure everybody knows that this is a very truncated version of slides to be delivered in between 40 to 55 minutes or so. In this particular case, I think she's going to try to accomplish this in around 45 minutes. Okay? All right, here we go. Again, I use this introductory slide as just simply a welcome. This will be tailored to your particular event or venue, and each one of these is different. Okay? Let me just pass through that. I try to keep it very simple up front that what we want to do as a team is we want to deliver accurate and relevant information and stay relevant for the federal employees that we're serving. Okay? I do break down from the very beginning. My initial thoughts go along this very slide. I want to know what the composition of the group is, and I know enough about the federal government that I would ask these questions. By a show of hands, how many folks in the audience are SERVs? By a show of hands, how many folks in the audience are FERS? Do I have any special category? I've got a group of people here that I'm delivering this to that are aiding me in being comedic. But what is the general feeling now of this group of federal employees? What is the general feeling about where we're headed as a nation, our economy? I'm not talking about their job or their federal agency, because trust me, if you ask that question, you'll quickly be overcome with a lot of adverse comments. We get a sense and a feeling about their federal benefits. At this point, I don't add my 2 cents in. I'm really trying to get some good feedback. I almost insist on it. I talk about then our current economic environment. I just talk about the new world and where we live and what we do. And then finally, I leave them with a transitional thought is, folks, what if what you thought today or what you thought you knew turned out not to be true? When would you want to know that? You can even read it off the slide right there. And allow that to sink in before you hit the next slide. The premise of that slide sets us up for this next picture. And again, it's just simply a cartoon. But that cartoon for me is pretty important, and here's why. I've even toyed with changing this slide, but I'll tell you why in just a second. We're trying to demonstrate our ability and our talent of helping them build a bridge to their retirement. Because many folks that they've approached in their adult careers as federal employees have concentrated on the retirement side, but never really took the time to understand it, to know with any intimate knowledge the benefits and what it means to maximize those benefits before they walk across that retirement bridge. So I use this story to tell, this slide to tell that story in that fashion. I want to help them pick up the benefits that they have in the federal government, combine those or integrate those into good retirement planning, and to have a safe journey across this retirement bridge to their true retirement desires. Okay? You use it as you see fit. It's a story that I tell, and I like to do that. So today's topics, folks, are going to be there's 4 essential topics. We're going to talk about some of the basics of retirement annuities, and those retirement annuities, if you will, are pensions. That's the pension for the CSRS and the FERS system. There are some details that we're going to go in that area. We're also going to talk about survivor benefit planning or pensions for survivors. We are then going to stop or then going to transition into a thrift savings plan overview. Can't get into great detail because remember, you're delivering this in an effort in 45 minutes to an hour to try to get them to say, hey, this is a regional representative or this is an individual that I need to talk to. And then finally, we're going to close with the Federal Employee Group Life Insurance and Federal Employee Health Benefits. Okay, that's the summary overview of today's topics. We want to distinguish today, as we start, the difference between the 2 systems that are currently out there, and that is the Civil Service Retirement System and the Federal Employee Retirement System. And just as a joke, I ask at that point, is there anybody in another system? And quite often you'll get somebody that's a jokester make up a third system. The federal retirement systems are divided really by date. The CSR system, you were hired before December 31st of 1983, and there are two components of that retirement system. That is the retirement annuity, or your CSRS annuity, pension if you will, and the thrift savings plan, or the one that looks like the 401k. And do remember that the survivor benefit portion of that particular program for CSRS permits the spouse to get up to 55% of his or her loved one's pension. Okay? Contrasted to that is the FERS, or Federal Employee Retirement System. That means you're hired after December 31st, 1983, or at two of the other times you could have transferred when they were promoting this throughout the government. In 1987 and 1998, you were brought into the FERS system. And at that time, there are three components. The annuity was smaller. The calculations for the annuity was suppressed a little bit. And that annuity is, again, the pension. But they also had the thrift savings plan, or the 401k, and a match inside there, as well as the third leg, which was the Social Security income leg. Okay? And they would say at the time that given the projections that they gave, that these three legs would equal the two legs of the system before. And that's how it was pitched, if you will, or that's how it was brought to bear to the federal employee of the day. Do note that the spousal survivor benefit is only 50% of the max benefit for the federal employee. Okay, so let's real quickly go through two of the eligibility slides. If you're a CSRS candidate in the room today, know this, that you have reached your 62nd birthday with 5 years of service, you have reached your 60th birthday with at least 20 years of service, or your 55th birthday with 30 years of service. If those conditions are met, there's not a single thing standing in the way to allow you to walk out with an unchecked and with a perfect retirement package. Now, we're not telling you that when you hit those wickets to retire without talking to somebody. We're saying that that qualifies you for no special conditions, and you can get out or you can retire. There is an age reduction that comes up if you're a CSRS, but all those conditions are really mandated by some legislative act or some act that's based upon what your agency is trying to do to manage their workforce. Whether it's an early out, transfer of function, a reorganization of your unit, or a reduction in force, there are special age and service considerations for getting out at that time, as you can see here on the slide. And for those of you that just want to do a few years and then, of course, take your money later at age 62, you just can be any age at all when you get out, but you had to have served at least a minimum of 5 years in order to have that annuity option. Do note, however, that if you do the deferred annuity option in both categories, you're leaving your health and your life insurance benefit on the table. Okay? All right. Again, contrasting, we've introduced a new topic here in the FERS. It's the same story, that you have the ability to get immediately out of your federal job if you've done 62 years old at 5 years of service, 60 and 20 again, and the new concept that we introduced here is MRA. MRA being minimum retirement age. You had to have reached this magical minimum retirement age as directed by, or as picked by the folks, just 1 second. Let me look at something real quick. Okay, folks. Sorry, we had a little technical difficulty there. We're back on the recording. Okay, so contrasting the CSRS eligibility matrix with the FERS eligibility matrix, it's the same story, and we introduced the concept of MRA. MRA being the minimum retirement age. I do want to make one distinction. Under the CSRS system, you have to reach one of those 3 ages in order to retire. It really does take an act of Congress, if you will, or a legislative act from your agency, because you'll notice that here there is an optional way to retire, and that's if you reach a certain age and have 10 years of service, you can voluntarily separate, but that is under some special that's under a special set of circumstances, whereas in the older system, you had to reach those age wickets before you could get out. Optional no age reductions, again, based upon those legislative acts of early out, transfer function, reorganization, or RIF. Okay? All right, one thing I need to do for those folks that are in the audience today that serve in the FERS capacity, that's the newer system, is recall that if you retire early, which is prior to age 62, you're automatically qualified to receive a supplement. It is often referred to as a Social Security supplement, but it's not paid by the Social Security. It's paid by your branch into the system that you happen to be employed in, which is the FERS system, and it does an imitation, if you will, of your age 62 Social Security benefit. Essentially, it takes the number of years you served in that system, divides it by 40 as the denominator, and that's the percentage of your age 62 Social Security income amount that you're going to receive, okay? Only the FERS employees are entitled to that supplement, and I will tell you that it is wage earnings tested, and we won't go into great detail of that wage earnings test today, but just know that if you make too much money, that benefit goes away. There's some exceptions we're going to talk about real quickly here. In order to qualify for the retirement supplement, however, you had to have retired in those top two categories as you see in the bullets. You had to reach your minimum retirement age with 34 years of service. You had to have reached at least age 60 with 20 years of service conditionally. Or if you did hit the MRA window, you had to be under one of these discontinued service or involuntary and early retirement authorities, okay? It does exclude that special provision I mentioned on the last slide, which would allow you to get out of the service after you've done just 10 years. And also, a big caveat for anyone in the audience today that is special category is now, because you're retiring prior to MRA, they waive that requirement. Therefore, you can actually receive that as a special category individual from the time that you retire all the way up to your MRA age, and the wage restriction is not applied to you during that period of time. Okay? All right, special category retirement. Speaking of that, that's for the law enforcement, firefighters, and air traffic controllers. It's pretty straightforward. There's mandatory retirement. We force those men and women to get out of the service, and we do that as a result of their age and longevity and the impact of this job on their service. So you can see here that mandatory retirement for air traffic controllers age 56 with 20 good years. Good years is referred to those years in special category in one of these three occupations. Okay, firefighters and law enforcement are identical at age 57. They have the option of retiring at what we call, for both SERS and FERS, the 50 and 20 mark. Age 50, 20 good years. They can do any age in 25. Again, you can see the caveat in the parentheses there, based upon SERS if you're air traffic controller, and FERS it can be any one of the three, as long as of those 25 years, 20 of them are considered registered good years. Okay. Now, what I've not done today, intentionally, I've not spent any time calculating your annuities. While that's really important, and while you want that to happen, and I hope that this is something you've already asked your agency for or your human resources for, what we want to do is we want to make sure that you know that you qualify to retire, and then if there's additional help needed to determine what it is and the amount you're going to expect, certainly we can talk to you about that later. Often, as I travel around the country teaching, I get the question, what about my military time? So I jump right into this here, and I'm now speaking to my fellow teachers out there. What about my military time? And as a retired military officer, it's a very easy segue for me to say it is top of mind for most federal employees that have served is they want to maximize that service as they move into federal government. So let's talk about that. The conditions are that if you've been honorably discharged, whether you're enlisted or officer, it does not matter. It is automatically, if you served before 1957 in the services, that time is automatically applied to your civil service. It is not automatic after that particular date, January 1st of 1957, and special conditions for crediting will apply, whether you're a SERS, Social Security candidate or not, and those special conditions, again, too numerous to mention today, but recognize that's very important as you guys decide what you're going to do to claim your benefits as you move into retirement. And then retired military, again, we get this question a lot. Do they have the option to combine their retired military pay with their federal retirement pay? Okay? So this is what I like to do then. I like to develop for those students here is I like to develop, listen, here's the two systems, the SERS and the FERS system. In this particular cases, these are stories that we have seen unfold over our careers. And in the case on the left, the gentleman basically had military earnings of around $3,360 that he owed back. The interest due on that was about 3 times the amount of the actual principal, and therefore he had around $13,579. I asked the question right then, do you think it's important for this gentleman to pay that money back? And there's really no way to answer that unless somebody in the crowd has already walked through this. But it's a good time to ask the question. I then move over to the FERS candidate and I say, okay, he had a larger military earnings. He had $132,000 at a smaller percentage, $3,900 approximately, and his interest due was only about twice that amount. Again, his total deposit required to claim his military time would have been $10,681. And I asked you as a student, and I asked the students in the class, is that something that you should purchase? Well, it does depend, and here's why. This one particular sample will kind of solve all those problems. The top, you'll notice how the calculation is done on behalf of that particular candidate for his military time. If he combines that military time with his civil service time, he has an annuity of a lifetime annuity starting at $3,000, approximately $3,000 a month. Without the military time, it's just under $2,000. So I submit to you, there's enough information right there to have earned the respect of what you want them to do regarding combining their military time and not. If you divide basically the amount that he or she would have to spend to purchase that back, which is $13,579, by the difference per month, it only takes them 12 months in this particular case, 12 and a half months, to where they're on the right side of that equation. If they live longer than 12 and a half months in retirement, every penny going forward, they're getting literally thousands of dollars more over their career. In fact, in this case, it could be nearly hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay? All right, there's a special group of you in this audience, all part of this annuity conversation. There's a special group of you that qualify for a thing called voluntary contribution. At this point, first, folks, I would like you to put your head down. This does not apply to you. This is only those folks that served, again, prior to that magic day, January 1st of 1984. Voluntary contributions are optional payments, or we can take optional money and stuff it into this account in the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund. In addition to the regular retirement deductions that are already taken out of their salary, this can be added. And the question would be, well, why would I do that, Gary? And let me share that with you. Pretty simple, but this little cartoon helps us decide. You're allowed to, as a result of your affiliation with this particular CSRS program, as well as the voluntary contribution program, take non-qualified funds, which means non-tax deferred. It's just setting in the bank. Perhaps it's a CD, it's an inheritance. You can then enter this in. If you qualify, you can put it into this voluntary contribution program, and that's pretty neat in and of itself. But you wouldn't do that if there wasn't an advantage. And the real advantage is number 3. You can roll that over to a Roth IRA. And the wow factor there for everybody in the room that's a CSRS candidate is it is a really solid and positive way to allow you to catch up on some what I would call tax-free benefit planning that you've not had as a result of your service under the CSRS program. Okay? A lot of information about that. We made it into really two or three simple slides, but certainly if this is something that should interest you, I would be jotting that down. All right, so in summary, as I talk about annuities, first and foremost, the question I ask everybody, hey, make sure that you qualify, not your neighbor told me that you qualified, or you heard about it from a buddy who thought you were close. You should know if you qualify. You can do that with human resources, and you can do that, of course, through the talent of what we bring to the table, which is giving each of you the opportunity to get an analysis, saying, hey, here's where I'm at, here's where I'm headed in retirement. I think I'm ready, and I think I qualify. Should you buy back your military time or not? It would depend. I can tell you there are cases where the cost is so prohibitive that you shouldn't do it, and the benefit that you get by doing that isn't any better than it was. But on many, many cases, and I will tell you, I struggle with finding very, very few cases that it wouldn't be worth your time to at least look into merging those two together. Okay? And then finally, CSRS or CSRS offset. Should you place your money in the voluntary contribution? That's a big it depends with a red caveat. I want to have that conversation because, folks, I'm telling you right now, a lot of counsel and advice you received from other folks out in the industry, in the financial services industry, don't know the extreme value of that voluntary contribution program. You owe it to yourself to talk to a professional and determine what that might be for you. Okay? All right, let's shift gears now to the spouses of our federal employees, and really the spouses of the principal owners, if you will, of this benefit, and it's the survivor benefit pension. Okay, and we refer to it often throughout the slides as SBP. It is placed on both the CSRS and FERS annuity. It happens, or it's received if death occurs while you're employed or while you're in retirement. It's got a certain set of metrics that happen if you should pass while you're employed, and those trigger automatically. You don't have to sign up for them; it just happens. But if death occurs in retirement, there's a whole sequence of events then that you need to be made aware of. Okay, so the survivors are, of course, your surviving spouse. Surviving ex-spouse, that typically follows in parentheses a court order of some sort, and surviving qualified children, it's children under the age of 18, 22 if they're a full-time student, or if they qualified under the Disability Act. Okay? Survivor benefit pension and retirements are not free of charge. It's often thought, oh, well, I just get this benefit for my wife because I served in the government. I wish it was that way. As a federal retiree myself, I have to spend money every month on providing that benefit for my spouse and my children. It's designed, again, for the current spouse. I think I mentioned before, if not the current spouse, there is an insurable interest clause, the former spouse or our children. But just so you know, the key on this slide, it's not free of charge. Here are the two types, or the two options, if you will, on how they play out. If you're a CSRS employee, you basically are allowed to leave 0% to your spouse all the way up to 55%. But I want to draw everyone's attention to that bullet on the bottom of the slide, which is any amount less than the maximum annuity must receive the consent of the spouse. And it has to be a notarized consent. And I will tell you, having done a lot of retirement seminars for the federal workforce, that's asked about 5 to 7 times during the retirement process, especially of the spouse, if they're sure that this is in the best interest of what they're wanting to do. Okay? We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so again, in the CSRS, you can put 0% all the way up to 55% of any whole dollar amount, so very flexible. There's one other caveat, which I promised to cover on the last slide here about health care, but we'll get to that. Under the FERS annuity options, the survivor annuity options, there's really only 3. Again, you can decline coverage, basically leave him or her without an annuity, or you can do half coverage, which is the 25%, and it's the only place where 25% equals half. But the max coverage of 50% is the full coverage, okay? So that's the only options that they gave you, and I'll bet that looking back and having served in the government so many years, that there's a reason why that the 0, 25, and 50 options became that way in the FERS system because of potential abuses of the options up in the CSRS category, okay? Again, either category or either pension system, any amount less than the max requires a notarized spousal consent. All right, let's do a quick example of the CSRS. If we're going to do 55%, which is the max that you can get, and let's say I'm the retired annuitant and I'm going to get $80,000. In order for me to be able to provide $44,000, which is that next 55% annuity down for my spouse, it's going to cost me. The middle's math, it breaks down how that is. It's a small percentage on the first $3,600 and 10% on the remaining. In this particular case, it cost me $7,730 the first year to leave the potential of $44,000 a year for my spouse. So you see there's a real cost there. So instead of taking home $80,000, I take home approximately $72,000, and my wife has the potential. I actually had somebody ask me in a class in northern Florida whether or not that you get both. The only way that you would get both is if you die, but somehow Duke the government is still giving you your annuity checks and your spouse receives hers. This is an either or. You get your full pension or she gets the survivor pension. Okay? And I think for those candidates out there, those CSRS and FERS employees out there, when we talk survivor pension, sometimes you shut down, largely because you're not going to be here when this is being executed. So this is on behalf of your spouses, okay? Here's the reality. This is a real-life case that we had for a person who had a high 3 of $96,000, that if you do the cumulative math over the course of their particular lifetime, from 55 to age 85, they will have spent $250,000 for that benefit, okay? And I want to impress upon you, this is one of those issues before, is what if what I tell you today changes how you think about information you might be carrying around? This is one that you should pay attention to, and here's why. That $250,000 that you just spent, if your wife should predecease you, that does not come back to you. That money is spent, it's gone, and I'd like to tell you that you helped contribute to solving the national debt crisis, but it's not. It actually goes to the insurance company that has been backing this decision that you made at retirement, which is your annuity choice decision, okay? So if the spouse predeceases the retiree, all those dollars are forfeited. I would tell you that there's some thought and some very good thoughts behind making sure that that's in the best interest of you and your family. Because if you should die together or you should predecease your spouse, it may work out. But I've got to think that I want to take control of that, and of course, in my own personal life, that's what I did with my spouse. Under the survivor benefit pension costs for the FERS candidates, there's really 2 options I told you. Of course, if I don't give them any option, it doesn't cost me anything. But if I give them the half option, it's a 5% cost. If I give them the full option, it's a 10% cost. That's the simplest. That's a very simple calculation to conduct on your behalf. Here's the example of we'll just do the full example. Full annuity, $50,000. It costs me $5,000 of my take-home pay in order to provide a $25,000 annuity for my spouse. Okay, very straightforward. That's the real cost. Okay, now I haven't said it yet, but it's absolutely worth mentioning. Okay, well let me close with this slide real quick. So remember I talked before how CSRS annuities are a little higher, FERS annuities are a little smaller because there's three legs of the retirement system. Look at the impact again. Here we have a high 3 candidate of $85,000, and over the course of his or her career, in fact this was 35 years of service. I think I've only shown 25 there, but it's about $102,000 of cost that if they die out of sequence or they don't die in the right, if you will, sequence of death, that money could be forfeited and the family will never have that money. Okay? Very, very important distinction. But this is probably the slide that you need to elbow your spouse and say, hey, don't forget this. Okay, this is we'll want to stomp up and down and let you know. The biggest deal that we find in planning we do across the nation for federal employees is in order for a spouse that absolutely needs, a spouse and or a family that needs health benefit coverages, your loved one who serves at the leisure or the pleasure of the government must allow you to participate in a survivor benefit pension in order to qualify for that lifetime of health care. There's no exceptions. As soon as you don't do that, and you should pass, trust me when we tell you we've had cases where it's a horrible conversation to have, that not only do they lose the annuity benefit, but they lose the lifetime of health care for themselves and their family. So take it from us at the Retirement System Solutions team. That's probably one of the principal things we want to protect you from folks that are standing on the outside that don't really know your system, don't know your benefit package, but could provide you the poor counsel. And I think it's a tragedy that does happen. Okay? So SBP equals, and just as it shows on slide 1 or bullet 1 of this slide, make sure that you have a survivor benefit pension. Therefore, you're going to forever have a lifetime of health care for your family. Now, I can't tell you what that health care is going to look at. I can tell you that no one in this room has really got the crystal ball necessary to do that. But it is changing. But it is one of the most powerful benefits that you have in your federal retirement package. Can you stop paying your survivor benefit at any time? Nope. It's a fire and forget. Once you've elected it at retirement, there's a very, very short window during the time that you're negotiating retirement that you can make that decision and reverse it. But once it's set in place, you cannot stop that. The cost of the benefits increase over time relative to your pay increases. And what happens to the money spent on these benefits if the spouse predeceases? I ask that to the audience typically that we're discussing, and right away they say it goes back to the insurance company. It does not come to your family. Okay? So a good summary of survivor benefit pension planning. All right. What everybody seems to want to talk about when we go on these training endeavors is the thrift savings plan. It is an element of your federal benefits, and it's probably the element that gets the most attention, largely because it's so similar to retirement benefits in corporate America. I referred to this before as a 401k that's governed by the same set of rules. Okay? So you can put in pre-tax deferral of your base salary and locality pay up to a certain maximum amount, and we'll see that amount on the next page. And you can also, starting in 2013, you can put after-tax deferral options. Those are now available, or your Roth options. Who can participate? All employees can participate, but do remember that the first candidate gets a match. We'll talk about the match in one moment, and the CSRS candidate does not. That's not a leg of their retirement. They have been afforded the luxury of contributing and the power of compound interest and deferral, but they haven't been given a match. Okay, for the first candidates in the room, the best way to summarize this chart, I actually have advisors that keep this chart in their wallet, but really, I make it very simple. 5% contribution, which is your match contribution, gets you 10% total. So 5 gets you 5 is a way to remember it. You put in 5%, the government matches you 5, therefore you have a 10% contribution going into your tax-deferred account at a minimum. You can put more than that, as we'll see on this slide. Right now, under the 2013 eligibility, it's $17,500 contribution limits. That's the principal amount that you're putting in. That's the max amount. And then at age 50, they give you the chance to catch up. In the event that you got a little slow start on those contributions, you're allowed to put an additional $5,500 a year out of your payroll. Okay? So you can see that that total would be, for 50 and above, you can put $23,000 in a tax-deferred plan, or excuse me, in your qualified plan. All right, there's 5 places that you get to put your funds: G, F, C, S, and I. G fund, F fund, C fund, S fund, and I fund. What I want to show you is just how to categorize them in your head and where they are. There's lots. In fact, you could spend a lot of time talking just about the G fund, just about the F fund. or any of the other subsequent funds, but we need to know based upon risk where those really are as federal employees. The least volatile historically has been the G fund. It's a government securities investment. It's invested in short-term, kind of non-marketable U.S. Treasury securities, and it's managed by the Thrift Investment Board. And no one else but government employees are allowed to get this. It's a really solid, stable, historically low volatility investment. The F fund, however, is a bond fund, but it's indexed against a set of indexes out there that are very much like it. As you can see, it's the Barclays Capital U.S. Aggregate Index, and it tracks the U.S. bond market. Yes, it's still got the Thrift Savings Plan Investment Board involved, but it's against an index. Other people can mirror that outside of the federal government. And the same thing holds true for the CS&I. C, we like to say, refers to that as large cap. Okay, and as you can see, it's the common stock index investments, and it would be more of the large cap like the S&P 500. S fund would be small cap. It's also getting higher on the volatility, if you will. Yes, it's common stock. However, it tracks the mid-size, mid-cap to small-cap funds. And then the I fund, I equal international, that's how it's often remembered, is the one that is an index fund for foreign investments. And you can see the index that's used there. So each one of those fund families, G, F, C, S, and I, is trying to mimic a sector of the U.S. stock market. And that's how federal employees and people that are involved in TSP are allowed to participate. Now, they can do that with a lifestyle fund, or excuse me, a life cycle fund, often referred to in the corporate markets as lifestyle, or an L fund. It's a combination of the G, F, the C, the S, and the I. The more time you have to retirement, the higher risk profile of these life cycle funds are. They provide some diversification. They will reallocate daily. They will rebalance, which means they'll try to stay in a certain, if you will, set of percentages over each quarter. The problem we found is the set it, forget it mentality of an L fund really caught some people by surprise. So use very extreme caution there, especially as you approach retirement. Recall that the 2010 fund that ultimately became the L Income Fund was down a substantial amount at a time when many retirees needed it. And that's just because of the nature of that crash in 2008. So yes, we do believe that there's value in these L Income funds or these life cycle funds, excuse me, but you also have to still stay at the helm of your investments, okay? There are no added fees for professional asset management. There are embedded fees, and of course in 2012, they started reporting those like all other retirement plans. Okay, so this leads us to the logical question. Since they've just introduced Roth opportunities for TSP candidates in 2013, I try to be a little cute here with Shakespeare. To Roth or not to Roth? This is the question. And people ask me that all the time. Should I put money in the Roth investments or should I put them in my traditional buckets? And really, it's an it depends conversation, but it's a conversation you should be having with your counsel. Okay? The details go as follows. It was available, again, for almost all agencies in 2013. It allows contribution of after-tax dollars, which means you'll take the income, it'll be after tax, and you'll then basically pay it into the TSP system. The investments and earnings off of those after-tax contributions will provide you under current law, will provide you tax-free access to your balances after age 59 and a half. It's going to be coordinated with the money that you currently have in the traditional TSP buckets, okay? Coordination is the key element. We'll discuss that in one moment. The government match, however, will be placed in the traditional tax-deferred bucket because our government continues to need revenue. Therefore, if you put dollars into the Roth, they're still going to match those dollars, but they will be tax-deferred dollars, which ultimately will be identical to what you've known in the past. You'll have to pay taxes on those dollars that they gave you when you get them out because our government continues to run on the revenue of our tax dollars. Okay? So let me make that very clear. You'll have tax-free buckets inside there and tax-deferred buckets at the same time, each solving a different problem. The investment choices will be identical. The tax consequences will change. That's it. Contribution limits, as a special note, are exactly the same on both. Somebody challenged me on the last time that I gave this. It doesn't mean you can put $17,500 in tax-deferred and $17,500 in Roth. It means the limits are the limits for the plan. Not necessarily for each of the sections. Okay, so that was a little bit about contributions, putting money in. Where do I put it? G, F, C, S, and I. How much should I use? How much can I put in? Now let's talk about shift because many of the folks perhaps that I talk to around the nation have been talked to about what they should do after they retire, but what are the options? What are the things that you can do after you retire with TSP? Okay, let's start with number one. You can cash out. I will tell you that's the default option. the Office of Personnel Management and the folks at the TSP Investment Board, they don't want to chase you around for a $3,500 investment account. They're going to send that to you. You have to ask them not to when you retire if you've got under $3,500. You can also leave the balance in TSP. Gary, can I leave my TSP alone and not touch it at retirement? Sure, it's not even part of your retirement application. However, huge caution there. There's a lot of things that change because now you went from an active employee to a retiree, and you are allowed to leave it there up until the RMD rules kick in. And RMD stands for Required Minimum Distribution, and that is until April 1st on the year after you turn 70 and a half, then you must take it and start consuming it. And you have to know why, because the government needs the tax revenue off of those tax-deferred dollars. You can roll it over to a qualified IRA. That's a choice that a majority of the people that we bump into do because it has the same consequences tax-wise, and it gives them full control of the asset. Lots of other sophisticated planning endeavors can happen then when the person takes control of the asset. You can also take a lump sum distribution. The big caveat for everyone in the audience that sees this is that will have a huge tax consequence, especially if that's a sizable sum. Let's say I'm making $100,000 a year, and I decide that year I want to take my $250,000 IRA, or excuse me, TSP distribution all at once. That would change your income that year by $250,000. You would be seen by the IRS as a $350,000 income. You can turn it into an immediate annuity. It's a government-designated carrier. I believe the current carrier, and I didn't check that, but I believe the current carrier is still Metropolitan Life, where you can turn that chunk of money in for a variety. I think there's up to 18 options of lifetime income via annuity. And then finally, you could ask for a certain amount, which is a specified amount, or say, hey, give it to me over my expected life expectancy. Okay, so lots of options. Just recognize that if you do it wrong, there are penalties out there. And if you try to do it in different times when it's not allowed, you'll run into what I consider some pretty significant resistance from the folks that run the TSP program. Okay, we're going to talk about some of those limits real quick, and then I'm going to tell a story I think that best illustrates how to evaluate or how to think about your TSP and taking money out of it. Okay, so the withdrawal options on or after your 55th birthday, if you're a CSRS or MRA, which is your minimum retirement age, if you're an FERS, they will not pose the 10% penalty. So if you reach the ripe old age of retirement and separate or retire at that time, they will not take that excise tax. That extra 10% tax will not be imposed. You'll still pay ordinary income tax as appropriate, but you will not have to pay the excise tax. As an active employee, you can withdraw. Once you've reached age 59 and a half, you qualify for what we refer to as an age-based in-service withdrawal, and you do that without 10% penalty, which means you can take it out, spend it if you want, you'll get taxed on it, or you can roll it into something of your own choosing, a retirement instrument that doesn't have a taxable consequence, which that's a really pretty neat feature. Okay? All right, so the withdrawal options on a slide, although there are many, the withdrawal options are you can take a partial withdrawal or a full withdrawal. Okay, that breaks down those two. But in a partial withdrawal, you can do it one-time withdrawal partially. Okay? You can do it before or after retirement. However, if you do it before you retire, remember what I said on the last slide, you have to have achieved age 59 and a half and still be working. Then it allows you to have the remaining balance for a future withdrawal. Okay? That full withdrawal is as such, which we alluded to a little earlier. I can take a single payment, probably not good advice or good counsel. I can take a series of equal periodic payments over my life expectancy, which that also could essentially avoid that 10% penalty. It's actually called the rule of 72T, and although a lot of detail, what you need to know, there is a way to systematically get the money out of TSP. You can take a specified dollar amount. You can take a life annuity, which means hand in the chunk of money, forever lose control over it, and they'll give you a lifetime of income. Or, folks, you can mix up any one of those 6 strategies. And if I have any one of those 6 strategies and 18 annuity options, you've developed quite the headache, if you will, in retirement if you just leave it over to mixing and matching. What I suggest you do is have a way to really understand what you can do with your TSP at retirement. So here's the story I like to tell, and it's the story of taking a bite out of an apple. I've told it in training across the nation, and it seems to resonate with folks. consider your TSP fund as you're reaching the maturity of, hey, I'm about ready to take access or retirement resources out of my TSP. Consider that TSP as an apple. It's a piece of fruit. Whether I'm 59 and a half in service or whether I'm retired, either way, the first time that you take a bite out of that apple, let's say I need a $20,000 bite out of that apple. And let's say I'm 59 and a half and I'm eligible to do it while I'm working. Or let's say I'm 62 and I just do it after I retired. I've taken the first bite out of the apple. Everything's okay still. TSP is not calling you and telling you that you have to exercise your right to and privileges to do that. It just doesn't matter. But as soon as I take that apple and take the second bite out, I will, in fact, guarantee that I'm going to start consuming that apple the rest of my life. I'm not going to just take out chunks whenever I need them. I'm essentially going to work in the confines of the rules of Thrift Savings Plan, and I'm going to start consuming it in one of those ways. I'm going to take the rest out in single payment. I'm going to take it over equal periodic payments, a specified dollar amount, over my life expectancy amount, or I'm going to, if you will, annuitize or take it in the form of an annuity. So I like to tell people that one bite of the apple, that's a decision that you get to make, and treat yourself to a treat or whatever, but the next bite of the apple, recognize that you're now on a distribution plan with Thrift Savings Plan. I hope that little story helps everyone. Okay, and then for the benefit of the class today, I wanted to throw up a comparison of the top 3 choices as of the calculator when I prepared this brief here in early September, and one of the choices, many choices that's out there on the open market, and I just picked one not by name that was going to win. I just picked any old, if you will, chassis. So if an individual was a federal employee, had $160,000 that they were going to spend in a life annuity with TSP, the best option they could get out there is $832 per month for the rest of their life. Okay? They hand the $160,000 over, that's the trade-in. If that person lives to a ripe old age, 30 more years, that's a great solution. What happens if that person lives 2 months or 2 years? Well, 2 months, he or she gets $1,600. The $160,000 goes back to the insurance company. Now, let that sink in. If you only get to take 2, you've taken the top payout with what they call the no other features annuity, and you only live 2 months and something tragic happens, your family does not get your TSP annuity. Let's say you take the bottom one, which is single life with a 10-year period where you know you're going to get it. Do the math on that. $800 a month, that's approximately, let's just say, keep the math simple, that's $10,000 a year. It's slightly less than $10,000 a year, okay? That $10,000 a year for 10 years, that's $100,000. Somebody, either you, your spouse, your children, somebody will get that, your beneficiaries. But what happens to the other $60,000 that you started with and any interest that you might have earned? That does not make it to your family, folks. The one that does in there is the single life with cash refund. What you get is your cash back, whatever you put in at the time you purchased it. You don't get the interest. You don't get all the benefits of that. What you'll have is let's say it's 2 months or 2 years and you don't make it home from work, then essentially if you chose that option, although it's the lowest monthly payout option, what you'll be sure of is that the money will make it back to your family. So when I told you before that many, many, many folks in the government privatize this and put this into a rollover product where they take control of the asset, that's the reason, is because you want to be in charge of those annuity options for your family. Okay? And then I compared that to what would happen if I bought a private sector product and guarantee, if it had a 15-year guarantee. You'll see that I will have, at a minimum, got all my money back, guaranteed. I started with 160, I would have gotten 162. This is not a recommendation for a product like that. This is simply saying, listen, if you're a fair market competitor and you tell folks, your advisors or your counselors, that this is what you're looking for as a secure income, there are ways in the private market to compete with what you could have done with your TSP source. All right, so let's summarize Thrift Savings Plan. How much should I be contributing? Boy, that's an it depends. But I will tell you, for the first folks, it makes perfect sense for me to say this without knowing anything else about you. You should be trying to get the max out of the government by at least mentioning the 5% match. Should I be in traditional or Roth buckets? That also depends on your outside investments, because a lot of folks were not exposed to a lot of tax-free planning. This new Roth process of 2013 can really change the lives of decisions you can make in retirement because of your ability to put money away tax-free. What buckets best suit my needs? That will depend on each investor in here. If there's 25 people in this audience, there's 25 different profiles of how you should invest. Okay? Should they all be in G fund, Gary? I can't tell you that. Should they all be in the international, the most volatile, the riskiest fund? I can't tell you that either. What I can tell you is the story of your adult investing, which is your profile, has emerged over the course of your working life, and you should set with somebody qualified to be able to help you navigate through that because it is that important. Should I be concerned about deferred taxes as a federal employee? I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm a federal employee myself. It's very important to know that your federal pension is deferred taxes. All the money that you would have typically of the government right now, unless you have outside assets, is going to be taxed when you start touching it in retirement. So if you believe taxes are going up and 100% of the dollars you're going to receive are deferred, there is a chance that you should start talking to somebody about some tax-free planning so you can avoid or minimize, if you will, the impact of taxes, a rising tax environment in the future. And then what distribution option is best for my situation headed into retirement? I told you there's 18 annuity options. There's a combination of probably 30 to 40 other options with TSP themselves, and that really is an it depends moment. So Gary, you gave me this whole slide, and you answered each question, it depends. And folks, I'm telling you, with regarding to thrift savings plan and 401k planning, it does depend. And it depends a whole lot more on who you are and what your purpose is for those dollars and the things that are important about you and your family than it does about how this program works, okay? All right, so we're coming on the home stretch here, and we're going to talk about two topics that are pretty important, and that's the Federal Employee Group Life Insurance as well as the Federal Employee Health Benefits, okay? So let's start with Federal Employee Group Life. Again, about 96% of all federal employees participate during their careers at some time. I do want to make a special note that if there are postal employees out in the audience, that we recognize that yours is a little more favorable because of the union and because of your particular agency has decided to pay your basic coverage up through age 65, retirement or 65. There are 5 categories. The basic coverage, which also has a small supplemental piece called extra, and that's for the young folks that are in the crowd. There's option A, which is standard coverage, option B, which is additional multiples of your salary, and then there's option C called the family coverage. In order for you to carry this over the retirement threshold, you must have this coverage for 5 years immediately prior to retiring, which means if they cast a look back, they're going to look back 5 years from the day that you submit your retirement, and as long as you carry the coverage that they see on your OFEGLI reports, then you'll be able to carry that into retirement. Otherwise, you can't go grab it at the last minute. It is group term insurance. The cost does increase every 5 years for the segment. It builds no cash value, and there are no loans against this particular benefit. The types of insurance, just as an overview so we can kind of talk about that going forward, is that term insurance, there are typically increments. You can be year by year, but increments from 5 to 30 years, and the cost is very low at younger ages. And the reason that cost is so low is because there's a high likelihood that you're not going to pass. So you can afford to say, hey, for 30 years I'll give you this life insurance coverage under these conditions because I don't think that you're going to force me to pay a claim as an insurance company. As opposed to permanent insurance, whereas permanent insurance can and will build cash values in many cases, which means it's going to be on the books and you're likely to keep it longer. Therefore, they need you to provide some additional premium and more risk, which means you'll pay more for that over the long haul. There are 3 styles: whole life, universal life, and many product variations in between there. Too many to mention. That's not what today's course is about. But do know this: when we talk about your FEGLI coverage, we're talking about a group term policy. One thing I want to tell you, having been a part of a large group in the military when I retired, is it was very affordable. I think it started at $8, and when I left, it was for nearly $500,000 in coverage. It might have been $22. But I also know that as I aged and got older and older and older, the size of my group, the people that stayed in that and didn't get their own private insurance, were the people who weren't able to get insurance on the outside, and therefore the cost of that became very, very prohibitive as time went on. Okay, so basic insurance is calculated as taking your salary, rounding it up to the next 1,000, and adding 2,000. That's a math trick. I don't know why that is. That's just the way it is. You also have a double indemnity, or you can get 2 times the amount of basic insurance if you die as an accident. Okay, and there's a whole series of what accidental death actually means. If you're younger and in the service right now, that benefit is doubled without any extra cost to you from the age you start all the way up to age 45 when that double stops. The optional insurance is pretty basic. A is a simple $10,000 while you're paying for that. B is up to 5 times your basic coverage, and then C is basically what we call family units, I can get $5,000 per unit for my spouse or $25,000 on each child. And by the way, folks, yes, if it's 10 children, it's the same cost for one as it is for 10. Okay, you're just simply buying policies, which I like to refer to as care or burial policies for your loved ones. God forbid something should happen to them. All right, these are really important points here. If you're taking anything away from these next 6 or 7 slides, remember this. You can reduce coverage if you go out and select your FEGLI elections at the time that you join, which you will. You can reduce them at any time. That's important. But you can only increase them during an open season, qualifying life event, which there are many, or you pass a physical. And I ask for the interest of the audience, and I'm talking to my advisors now, but advisors out there that are listening to this training, when was the last open season? That was over a decade ago. Okay, this is not the open season every year that you see with federal employee health benefits. This is life insurance, and usually an open season is followed by a huge carrier change or programmatic change, which allows them to come back into the program. I don't see one coming for the foreseeable future, so don't think that they can just get this anytime because they didn't elect it earlier. Okay? All right, so let's walk through a candidate. In this particular case, here's the candidate, and basically making $63,000, rounds up to the nearest thousand, so it makes it 64 plus 2. You can see that his coverage basic coverage is $66,000. The part I do like is we projected that that's going to rise all the way out till he retires, and then if he elects the reduction option, what will happen is he'll quit paying at 65, and it will fall off until it reaches 25% of its highest amount. Okay, and that takes 37.5 months. So from 65 to 72.5 or whatever, from 65 to almost 70, he will have coverage, but it'll be on a decline. Do know this, folks, it is free. This is coverage you should consider. Don't get mad and throw FEGLI away, all of it away, right at the time you're retiring because you just threw away potentially $25,000, $30,000, $40,000. You need to talk to somebody who knows the FEGLI benefit because this is one of those that stays forever and ever on the books if you do it right, and you don't pay another dime for it after you retire. The extra benefit amount, like I mentioned before, it reduces to 0 by age 45, but while you're young, it doubles the coverage of your actual benefit. Option A is a $10,000. I refer to it as a death benefit, a burial rider. Obviously, it's a death benefit because it's life insurance, but the point being is it's just an extra $10,000. Works just like the basic coverage, falls off the exact same way. The difference is you don't have to elect it to fall off. It will do that at retirement if you carry it into retirement. Okay? Option B is additional multiples of your basic coverage. So if you were making $65,000, it's going to be multiples of $65,000. In this particular case, 5 multiples put him up to $425,000. You can keep that going forward. I'll share with all of you today. You can do that. I've actually had folks keep it until they're 70. But when they look at the cost of that, there's a real hard conversation to be had starting at around age 50 to 55, that option B starts to become very prohibitively costly because it's a much larger multiple of your salary and it's also increasing much more rapidly. So I share with you, don't throw it away till you've had the conversation of what do I need insurance for, am I healthy enough to receive an alternative, or if I'm not healthy enough, be cautious about when you throw that away, okay? When you turn it off, by the way, it will reduce from the time you retire all the way down to 0. It will go away totally. Okay, and here is the coverage for the family. Of course, the spousal options are $5,000 units. The children options are $25,000. In my case, 5 children. So each of my children will have the 5 units, if you will, or $12,500 of coverage. My spouse will have $25,000, which means if, God forbid, something should happen to them, I'll have money to put them or to bury them and to celebrate their lives, okay? Pretty affordable insurance available for your family with no medical underwriting, okay? And then in summary of those 6 or 7 slides, what happens over this person's career? He is very well covered as he gets down to retirement. Perhaps his assets are paid for, his insurance demands have declined, gone to 0. He hits 65. He quits paying his premiums from 65 to almost 70. He's got coverage that's starting to decline, but he quit paying premiums for those last 5 years. And he gets out here, and in this particular case, he's got nearly $25,000 of insurance that he'll never pay another dime for. And that will follow him around as long as he lives, and then he will receive that money. Of course, his beneficiaries will receive that money to take care of his final expenses. Okay? So I like to save people from throwing that away. All right, this is a very real issue I want to highlight. Folks ask me this all the time, Gary, at what time should I pick this coverage up? What time should I decline this coverage? Well, it's easy to talk about picking it up. You should pick it up when you're insurable and you enter the service. And then you should start talking to somebody who's talented enough to kind of help you through this, that can say when you should start, if you will, declining coverage or stopping coverage, if you should do that. But in this particular case, this candidate took the coverage from 53 to age 80, and they paid a total of $306,000 over their lifetime of coverage. They nearly self-insured for what would have paid out $484,000 to their family. So that's a lot of premium. And I want you to look at the annual column, and I want you to look down at about age 60. You notice it doubled from 55 to 60, and then look at it between 60 and 70. What a crushing blow. Those costs become really prohibitive. And unless you've been given bad news and are uninsurable, you really should start thinking about maybe that's not the best place to have your retirement resources going, is going into that life insurance. Okay? On the other hand, here's the candidate, which was honestly, this is a reflection of the model we just went through. This individual took the counsel and said, hey, at age 60, I'm going to stop. He quit paying his premiums at age 65, so he had a total of $2,380 from the time we did his analysis. And you'll notice that he carried $24,250 into retirement. But he had 4 or 5 years down that, if you will, down that slope, that he still had coverage. Also, he went through an insurance analysis and found out what he needed and if he was required to have additional private insurance. Okay? It really does help for you to stop and to learn what each of those elements bring you, because whether it's basic, option A, B, or C, you should know what it provides you while you're working, what the transition point is, when you should capitulate, if you will, and perhaps get rid of that, but also if you should. And that probably is bigger and more important than any, because I would tell you, we've talked to too many federal employees that got rid of their FEGLI before they were eligible for a private alternative. Okay? So what insurance should I have? I just answered that. What insurance should I take into retirement? And you remember what I said about the 5-year look back? Make sure that you're covered well before you get there based upon qualifying life events or the times when you're allowed to enroll. And then are there any options that are free in retirement for me? Well, I just shared 2 options with you, basic and option A. Okay, those you can carry free insurance into retirement. I'm not telling you today on this training that that's the only 2 you need. I'm telling you those are the free ones in retirement. You should go through, allow yourself, and for your family's sake, to go through an analysis that determines what that value is. Okay? All right, let's shift over to our final topic here, federal employee health benefits. And again, this should be an entire day. You could spend an entire day, but of course we get into the weeds, especially talking about the changes coming in October, as well as January 2014 and beyond with the Affordable Care Act, and also referred to as Obamacare. But let's talk about just the value of having a health plan where your employer is contributing a significant amount and you're receiving benefits. That is the Federal Employee Health Benefit Plan. Okay? It's a continuation of coverage. Yes, you can carry it into retirement. You're allowed to carry it into retirement, but look at that miracle bullet on the first bullet. You must have had that for 5 years prior to leaving. That's the that's the continuous coverage clause that says they look back for 5 years, they see that you had it, great. You can proceed into retirement with your federal employee health benefits. You must retire on immediate annuity. Remember the deferred annuitant that just played a little bit in the government that got out and wanted to draw a check at 62? That person is not eligible. That's not eligible for their FEHB. And remember, if you're a spouse, that spouse must have a survivor benefit pension or have an SVP check for the spouse to continue FEHB. And by and large, what that really comes down to is the Office of Personnel Management needs a way to stay in communication with the spouse, and therefore the SVP check is the way they do that. If they get an SVP check, they know how to go bill for the health care. They're not going to chase down, and I often think that maybe they're looking for a reason to get us off the rolls, but they're not going to go look for you to pay premiums at all. Continuation under other forms of annuities, yes, those exist. There's 1,000 different nuances for that, but employees who separate are eligible for a deferred annuity. They will not be able to reinstate their health insurance later under any condition. Okay? All right, temporary continuation of coverage, that's not for retirees. That's just for those of you in here that might actually just be transitioning. Yes, you can do that. The enrollees, however, pay full premium. You don't split the premium cost like you do now with the government, 1/3, 2/3. You pay 1/3, the government pays 2/3 today. In this case, you'll be paying full premium. And your dependent children also have that eligibility. You can see the conditions. Marriage, actually, believe it or not, married kids can now keep coverage up until their 26th birthday. Loss of status as a stepchild, foster child, or recognized natural child, depending upon the circumstances of those legal documents, you can keep a temporary continuation of coverage. Okay? All right. So as much as that was only 3 slides, if you will, on health benefits, the biggest thing is keep it. The federal government is funding 67% of that for you, so let's make sure that we protect and preserve that. Remember what happens to Medicare and your federal employee health benefits as you travel through this retirement journey. At age 65, if you're actively employed, still working for the government, your FEHB is going to be your primary insurance. That's it. You're paying the same premiums. It's going to be the same. If you have retired and you're 65, you will have enrolled in Medicare. Medicare becomes the primary insurance carrier, and your FEHB and or TRICARE, it depends on which federal system that you're using, those will possibly be the supplemental policies. And that's key to know, especially for those here that we talked about earlier that might be military retirees. After age 65, those retirees who are Medicare eligible, you may, and this is what I tell people, keep your options open. You may suspend your health insurance in order to enroll in a Medicare-approved HMO. I can't tell you what that's going to be in the future because that changes about every 30 minutes on Capitol Hill. And, of course, that sends vendors into a tailspin of creating products on behalf of clients. What I can tell you is if you carry it into retirement, whether it's TRICARE, whether it's federal employee health benefits, and you're a Medicare recipient, you get a chance to suspend those per the rules, which means put it away and draw it out later if you should need it. Okay? That's a key distinction in carrying that into retirement. Your premiums will be deducted from your monthly annuity, which is your monthly paycheck, and if the annuity is insufficient, you and OPM better have a great relationship. I wouldn't want to test those waters. Also, it applies to those military retirees, again, like I said, that have TRICARE. If you really want more on that, there's an entire book out there called Coordination of Federal Benefits, and it's about TRICARE, Medicare, and FEHB. Okay? All right, so that brings us to these last 2 slides are really kind of a bonus set of slides. We get this asked a lot, so we wanted to give it some value, and that is, hey, Gary, when should I retire? Well, I will tell you, I wasn't with you for the 35 years you created this environment and that you created all these benefits, but I can tell you there are certain mechanical days that you should consider, and that's what this slide addresses. If you're a CSRS candidate or employee, you should consider the first 3 days of any month because that's the rules, okay? If you receive your first retirement check, you'll receive it about 5.5 weeks later. It really does depend upon your processing. But if you waited till the 4th or 5th, that means they're going to delay the process. You're going to be out of work, not receive a check. They're not going to start the process for a month, which means the 5-week delay plus the month you delayed, it's going to be a couple months before you get your paycheck. So make sure, by all means, that you try to retire before the first 3 days of the month. Gary, can I retire at the end of the last month? You sure can. We're just telling you the upper limits of what you should do, okay? The example I use is if you retire March 4th or after, your computation won't start until April 1st, and that means you don't get money until the first week of May, okay? And then I want to make a distinction there. The distinction is that even though we're allowing you to have this conversation into the month, beginning of the month, if you're able, it would be smart to try to delay this to around December or January for just the normal fact that you're carrying all those benefits forward and you've accrued most of the annual benefits, and it's going to be the most efficient for carrying annual leave over and the benefits of even perhaps sick leave at that time. So perfect scenario for me, if I'm a FERS candidate or CERS candidate, I'm thinking the first 3 days of January are perfect, okay, of every year. All right, what about the FERS folks in the room? FERS folks in the room, your computation for your annuity will start immediately, but you have to do it before the end of the month. You got to do it before the 31st, 30th, 28th if it's February, but you have to do it before the end of the month, okay? The same exact conditions exist. If you delay that and you wait, you're literally going to miss an entire month's pay. And we don't want you to do that because that's leaving thousands of dollars on the table. Look at the scenario there. The example is the same. If you wait until March 1st instead of the end of February, you're essentially leaving a month's worth of retirement pay on the table, okay? And the same thing before I told you about December retirement. Remember, the greatest month to collect all benefits is typically the December time frame for the FERS employee. Sometimes it leaks over into January, the end of January the next year, but that just depends upon when the leave cycle and the annual leave calendars hit in the government. Okay, now what we'd like to do is we'd like to enlist your help. We spent 45 minutes, probably a little longer today because literally I was teaching advisors and trying to give some content in there. but we really want some feedback. I started out with a slide talking to you about what we do and the value of trying to be relevant to you, and also showing you I've got a whole basket of things that I know you're being addressed in your retirement picture, and they're over here and they're on this side of the retirement bridge, and I know you're trying to carry those over, and it can be confusing. And I know you don't do this. I do this every day for a living. But we would like your feedback on what you found in just this 45 minutes to be relevant to today's federal employee. So please give us that feedback. Help us serve your local community better. Each of you tonight are entitled to what we call a FEBA, which is a Federal Employee Benefit Analysis. Because again, if there's 25 of you in here, there are 25 unique stories. How'd you get here? Did you serve in the military? What have you been able to do so far because of life's events and your contributions? What sort of insurance elections have you made early on or didn't make? What are the things that make you unique to being you? We can sit down with you, roll up our sleeves, and say, hey, here's our analysis. Here's how we would comfortably package our goods as we're getting ready to head over that bridge into true retirement. And then finally, because of our proximity, and I say this for every area I'm at, I want them to know that I'm right here in this area. And in my case, if I'm doing this on behalf of a registered regional representative, I simply at that time endorse the regional team again. I start out that way and end that way. If it's our own practice, of course, I'm saying right here in Virginia, right here in Middle Tennessee, we're your neighbors. We live right here with you. We're delighted to use our academic talent to help you, and please help us. And then I close with a traditional question slide. Any questions? I usually get questions throughout the brief, and I use that as time to enlist, if you will, bringing home some of the value of the last 45 minutes. Okay, so that concludes the training. Again, Jackie set that up. Jackie, thanks for doing that. I wanted to make sure that everybody out there, and just in a summary comment, knows that this is an abbreviated version, that I'll deliver that many slides, and that's about 50, we determined 50 content slides in about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And I do it with stories, and I cruise through some, but what I gave you there was a sample of content for training as well as some of the transitions. Any questions you might have when Jackie's brilliant at this, you can contact her. You can get on my schedule. We can talk for a few moments. But we hope that this helps you in terms of planting seeds out there and navigating, if you will, through the workforce, federal workforces in your regions to help them. It's been my pleasure, and we will talk to you very soon.